Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. It is such a pleasure to welcome you to this, the 9th conversation in the Pan-African Forums, a series of online conversations amplifying African perspectives on a range of social, economic, and political issues. For the last 8 months, we have been holding conversations, envisioning the potential and possibilities of working together beyond the narrow confines of nation states from the standpoint of our shared African identity. And yes, we recognize the broad diversity that's contained within all the many, many people who own Africa in one way or the other. We are thrilled to have you join us, whether you're here with us in the Zoom webinar room or whether you are joining us by live stream on YouTube. My name is Mshai Mwangola. I have a really wonderful panel that I'll be introducing to you in a moment. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, let me just also say that if you haven't caught any of the last 8 conversations, please do give yourself a treat and go over to the elephant.info website, and also to the YouTube channels of Alliance Française de Nairobi, AF Nairobi, as well as the Elephant on YouTube. And if you look under the playlist, the Pan-African Forums, you will find all of our previous 8 conversations. Last month, we had such a wonderful time thinking about what Africa Day means, as we also delved into the relationship between Pan-Africanism and education. And today we'll be thinking about activism. So much of what we have been thinking about and talking about and reflecting on has been about the range of people over time and in so many places all over the world who have invested in organizing across political, regional, linguistic, generational, historical, and any manner of boundaries that you can think about. And so today we wanted to really give a spotlight on that by speaking to some of the people who are right in the middle of that work. If you are in Zoom and you would like to ask a question, in the second part of the conversation, after we've heard a bit from our panelists, I will be inviting you to put your questions in the Q&A. Feel free to use the chat just to talk to us, let us know what you're thinking, tell us who you are. But if you put your questions in the Q&A, it'll be much easier for me to pick them up and share them with the panelists. And if you're joining us on YouTube, we will be looking at the comments there as well. So just drop your questions onto on the YouTube comment. So let me just go on and introduce straight to the panelists. And we have a panel of 3. One panelist is still on their way over. They had another commitment that they're just making their way over from there. But let me just first by starting to introduce Meluda Bushu, who has a master's in statistics and applied economics. Meluda is a data scientist, a PhD candidate in artificial intelligence safety, and she is an advocate for cyber peace, media, and information literacy. She is the regional coordinator of the Youth Subcommittee for a UNESCO Media and Literacy Program, and she represents Arab states with that. She also is the events focal point at the Youth Board of Digital Grassroots and is a member of the coordinating collective of Africans Rising, representing the North Africa region. Meluda, welcome.
Thank you a lot for the introduction. Glad to be here.
I'm really glad you're here. I've been waiting all along to have this conversation. And, usually when we think about Pan-Africanism and, activism at that level, we rarely think about data. And I was so excited when I saw your data, your bio, and looked at how much you're working with data. And I'm just curious if you could say just a little bit, you're a PhD candidate in artificial intelligence safety. What does that mean?
Artificial intelligence has been here for decades, since the mid of the 20th century. But recently, hardware and computational capacities had allowed us to implement a lot of these algorithms that have been developing so long. But now the issue is that artificial intelligence is like a black box. And sometimes it can lead us to have unauditable programs and have programs that generate a lot of bias. For example, a recent study that showed that some facial recognition program failed to identify people other than white males, for example. And this is a bias that we don't want to have in our algorithms, the very algorithm that we rely on in our daily basis. So this is basically what I want to do in my PhD thesis, is to make this black box auditable and accountable, so that we can make policies that can be justifiable in the context of these algorithms.
Oh, okay. And it's interesting what you've just pointed out, that, you know, we tend to think that when we think about anything technological, we think that it doesn't have anything to do with identity, and it treats all of us exactly the same. And you've just spoken to how it can be, it can disadvantage people, just even depending on what the camera is taking in. You are the regional coordinator, as I said, of a youth subcommittee that's working on a media and literacy program. Can you tell me a little bit more about that as well?
Yeah, this is like one of the programs that UNESCO is working on actively. It's about media and information literacy. And media and information literacy is basically equipping people with enough skills to be able to decode media and information through all types of available mediums that we have. For example, videos, written information, even a movie can be a medium for a type of information. So my interest in media and information literacy comes from the fact that a good citizen or a very active citizen comes from a citizen who is well informed. But disinformation is everywhere and misinformation is everywhere. Sometimes it is intentional and sometimes comes from the fact that people don't have enough skills to detect what's fake and what's not. And this is something that we have witnessed during the pandemic. Some people have risk their lives because of fake health information. And this is no joke. Lives are at stake. Not only our democracies, not only attacks on corporations, not only attacks on social equity or creating prejudices that are not there, or creating conflicts or politicizing media, but it's also about people's lives. So I'm very interested on this topic as to make the information space or the media space asymmetrical and advantageous for everyone there consuming media and using digital tools. In the GovMil Youth Committee, we are implementing a various set of programs and doing a lot of work, like, for example, consulting for some policies, framework. Recently, UNESCO is developing like frameworks for artificial intelligence or for media, and we are working and helping on that capacity. And also we are facilitating communication between grassroots initiatives that are in the Arab states and linking them, serving as a gate between them and the UNESCO.
Okay. And so, and you know, as you said, you represent the Arab states, because often when we look at these global programs, some of the issues people face are very much based on the context that people are on. You also are a member of the coordinating collective of Africans Rising from the North Africa region. And I know that you're also on digital grassroots. So digital grassroots, I'm going to assume, has also to do with technology and media. But Africans Rising is a Pan-Africanist network, or at least it brings together people organizing on African identity. So could you tell me how this, it seems to me that you're doing so much in terms of coordinating, working, bringing people together. How is it for you working in these different spaces all at the same time, as well as doing your PhD and everything else that you do? What's it like, and why are you so invested in all these many spaces? Like, I can't even imagine where you find the time to do all of this.
Yeah, it's really challenging to try to do things that are not like that. You are working as volunteer, working like on some boards, some non-NGO boards, or working as a regional coordinator can be like time consuming and sometimes frustrating, like to get projects done and to meet the deadline. But in the same time, I have to earn my living and work. And in the same time, I have to work for my PhD thesis. Yeah, it can be frustrating and sometimes stressful, but the end goal is what keeps us moving. It's the goal. I believe that digital, as I work, we are all now now we are in a virtual space. We are living basically in a cyberspace. So this is something that I want to study academically, to work in my capacity as a public servant with the Digital Development Agency here with the government of Morocco, and also something that I want to see, to work on, and to develop skills on as manager of NGO and social projects. This is something that I want. It's beneficial for me as a person, to develop this kind of skills, but at the same time, I feel like this is my duty to give a part to the world for the thing that they gave me, to give something to my continent, to give something to my country and to the world where I live in.
Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to talking to you through the rest of this session. Let me also bring in Sidia Chisango. Sidia, you have something similar in terms of what Meluda has just been saying, because I think you're also really invested in this idea that, listen, I know we have to make a living and I have to be a professional in some field, but also thinking about how you can connect that to issues of social justice, thinking about how, to prepare young people. And I know you're very much invested in education. So I find it interesting that both of you are talking about how do I do what I do and what I'm passionate about and what I'm a professional in, but I've also got a hand also in making sure that I'm invested in some form of social justice. So I know you're an entrepreneur and that you're part of your big passion is training young people in social justice activism. And as I've said, also preparing them for the world of work. I've seen you do some work also in terms of young women and creating products that fit young women in the world that they're in. All this while you are a student, or I think you have recently graduated. Are you going to graduate in a Master's of Education, if I am not wrong?
Okay, thanks. First, I wanted to start to say thank you for the opportunity to be sharing a little bit of our work and also our thoughts about the topic, and for starting and talking about us specifically. And I struggle all the times. If you remember in the beginning, I said, at this point, I don't even care if people really pronounce well my name or not, or if they choose to just say she's just an entrepreneur or just an activist, because most of the times I introduce myself based on what are we talking about. If we are in a business or entrepreneur meetings, etc., this is the way I will introduce myself. If I'm with activists, etc., only it's just as an activist. If I'm with people from education, it's just an education person. So yes, I've been between so many things, and sometimes it's really challenging for me to say, oh, this is Sidia, like in general. But I would define myself as someone who's like very, very passionate about education. Yes, I'm about to complete my master. If I would choose, like in my life, I would only do education, but I don't think I can make that decision of it's only about education, because we are in a certain context where we cannot, in my country specifically, I cannot choose what to do because there are so many challenges and we need to stand up and do something. And this is probably one of my biggest frustrations as well, because I see me between so many things, dealing with terrorism, dealing with peace, dealing with human rights, dealing with education. There are so many things, but I see myself in future only like focused in education. That's the reason why I invest until today training people, because I want to make sure that we will have enough people with capacity to be in different front lines, so that the other generation of activists they won't have to struggle as much as I'm doing, and other comrades here in the country, they are doing, like needing to do these, environment, education, blah, blah, blah. So many things at the same time. It's a little bit complicated, but here we are.
Here we are. And I think that's part of what often defines an activist, is that, yes, I have to get my bread and butter. Yes, I have to study. But then this heart of their issues, their things that are happening in my community, in my environment, in my world, and they cannot wait for me to finish with this one and then go there. And I think that's what both of you are already making so evident. Sidia, I know you started in student politics while you were at the university. And what I found interesting is you started, as a student leader, I don't know if I want to say you started, but I know you were a student leader at the university. And then you moved beyond the boundaries of one university or even one country, and you began networking and going to other places all over. I was looking up at where you've done your work, and it's not just in Mozambique. Tell me more about this. Why is it important to you to not just focus your activism in one space, but why is this idea of, and I'm going into the question of Pan-Africanism, of moving across boundaries, networking with other people? I've just talked about Meluda's doing work with Africans Rising, which means she's connecting with people right across the world. And you also, right from the beginning with student politics, why is it important for you to network outside your country?
Okay, so maybe I should start saying that even though I wanted to do politics, science, I think it's that I did education, my degree, and now my master in education as well. But I'm very interested in politics, again, not because I really like it, but because it's important and it's necessary. We cannot stay and say, oh, I don't like this, because those who like are there making all these mess things. So we need to be in and watch every single thing. And the question that you asked about why it's important for us to be connected. First, I would say hi to Meluda. Now she's my colleague in Africans Rising. I joined the movement since 2018, and now I'm in the transition group of people who were in the last elected board to the new one. And yes, it's a pleasure to be sharing this space with Meluda. In general, I truly believe that as Africans, there is no development that we will we will achieve separately or individually as one country or other country. If we want to have a clear reason for that, we need to look back and see what's happened with us. Did we move what was failing? Did we move all together? Did it bring any change? If it didn't, then the answer probably is we need to change the strategy. And we need to understand that all the knowledge, all the expertise, everything that we have and we apply in our countries, we need to be able to share with our countries and also learn what other countries are doing so that we can implement here and grow all together. If we don't do that, most probably what's going to happen is that we will still have isolated countries trying to move, but the problems of Mozambique can easily affect Tanzania, can easily affect South Africa, Malawi, etc. So it's extremely important for us as a continent to acknowledge and understand that it's important to build a very stable power, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And I think both of you demonstrate the importance of not just being rooted in what's happening in your country, but also in your region, and then the continent, and then the world, that, we are not in some small silo. You mentioned that you're doing work with peace and justice. And I know that you are particularly known for your social media work. In fact, I was reading up something, and I think this was on the hashtag Gaza18, or it might have been for solidarity for Capo Delgado. And it wasn't about you, it was somebody writing about the campaign, but they talked about how when you came in and you began tweeting about it, it got so much attention. Before we go to just giving both of you a chance just to speak to what you have as a way of getting us to think through deeply about the questions of activism, tell me why social media for you is so effective and something that you have chosen to invest so strongly in.
I think as a young person today, we understand the power of social media, mostly because of the context that we live in countries like Mozambique, for example, that we claim that we have all this freedom of expression, etc. But you know exactly what happens when you try to say something or you literally say something. And social media it's almost this safe space, but it's not totally safe because it has its own challenges, but nothing compared to going to the streets and get shot in just 1 or 2 seconds. So actually on social media, we thought that it's easy for us to target the right people that we want to call the attention, and also to receive support of others who are not, they don't have enough courage to do it publicly in other traditional ways. So we allow people to also participate the way they feel more comfortable. And particularly, these two campaigns that you mentioned, first one, Gaza 18, and the last one, Cabo Delgado is also Mozambique. This last one was the most powerful campaign because I would say it was the first campaign to raise the awareness about terrorism in Mozambique in 2018. Before we start the campaign, I say we because I had the idea, but also other activists just supported me. It wasn't only just me. We put all the gas because we wanted to make sure that the government and also the society would put attention. At that time, when we started the campaign, nobody would talk about what was happening in the north of the country. Nobody would think about the IDPs. Nobody would think about the humanitarian support, how to fight these. All of this noise that we are listening today, we didn't have anything in 2018. Just to use the term terrorism, I keep using this as an example, was only possible in the beginning of 2019. 20, last year, was last year. So social media really gave us this space of using this hashtag, and people, every time they wanted to relate anything about terrorism, they would just say, Cabo Delgado is also Mozambique, Cabo Delgado is also Mozambique. And that's how the campaign started to grow. And definitely social media gave us exactly what we wanted in terms of exposition, not only nationally, but also internationally.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll come back to this question. And the reason I brought it up is so often you hear people talking about these keyboard activists, as we call them, and people saying, oh, it's a complete waste of time. These are people who don't have the courage and they don't want to put their lives on the line and so on. And I think you're already beginning to talk about one way in which this historical moment is allowing us to have types of activism that perhaps a generation before were not able to have. So I think without any further ado, what I'm going to do is to come to some of the questions that had shaped the conversation that we wanted to do today. And I'm going to invite both of you to just speak for 10 to 15 minutes. And just for the purposes of putting everybody on the same table, let me just share some of the questions. And I thank everybody who has sent us a question, who's brought it up on a chat, who sent it on, sent me a WhatsApp message or has put it on social media, and we've picked it up to do with activism. I know we probably will not get to all of these questions, but at least they give us a place to start to ask. So what is Pan-Africanist activism and how does it differ from other kinds of activism? Both of you have talked about many different kinds of things that people might want to invest in. Is there a difference when we talk about specifically Pan-Africanist activism? I think we've already began talking about why this is important to you on top of everything else that you do. Are there any common principles in your mind that characterize Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist activism? And is it different from the specificities that you identify with the spaces that you work in? Are there things, perhaps, are there challenges to doing work across the global Africa, or working with different constituencies as opposed to only those in your countries or regions or communities? Then also, is there a case to be made for integrating the concept, ideas, or principles of Pan-Africanism in all kinds of activism that we're involved in as global Africans? Can we just talk about technology and not have to look at it from being an African in any form? Or must we find a way of bringing in this question of our identity into every kind of activism that we do? And if we do that, does that risk taking away from all the other solidarities and all the other causes that we are looking at? Do you have a particular role model, whether they're contemporary or historical, that you find useful, inspiring, or helpful in your own activism? What are some of the challenges that activists face when it comes to developing a program for Pan-Africanism in any of the spaces that you're working with? I'm thinking here of one of the panelists we had in a previous discussion who talked about how difficult it is to translate the concept of Pan-Africanism into French in the same way that it is used in English. So any challenges that you might find in the spaces that you're working with. And then what is the historical challenge or gift of this moment as it comes to the question of activism when we think of Africa? Or have we moved beyond thinking about identity? Should we be talking about a global identity as we move into the 21st century? So those are some of the questions that took us to thinking about this particular conversation. And I'm going to invite whichever of you wants to start. Meluda, would you like to go first? Please, the floor is yours.
Of course. Of course, thank you Allah for these questions. I think they are very crucial for us to figure out what Pan-Africanism activism is. Something that I have learned by working with my fellow Africans. So Pan-Africanism for me has a long history that all Africans share. For me, it represents the unity of all Africans to promote our well-being, either economically, socially, intellectually, psychologically, politically, etc. Pan-African activism is a holistic view to our lives as African people and African descendants. So it is not limited to a geographical location or to a special ethnic group within Africa, but rather it extends to our origins, our mutually shared history and values. Africa is a large continent. We have a very old history that some anthropologists say that trace back to the very early dawn of the genesis of humanity. But we enjoy also a tremendous geographical and cultural diversity, but all of this is muted by many struggles we inherited since the imperialism and colonization era. I lived in Morocco my whole life, but when I started traveling through my mother continent, I discovered that there is a communication gap between us Africans. We don't know much about each other's, and educational systems are overloaded with information about other continents and not about ours. Another example of how our African issues are muted at the international level, the conflicts we have, the struggles we have do not occupy much space in the media, in the international media space. So Pan-African activism for me is important as an attempt to connect back with our very ancient history and to prove that we can rely on ourselves to solve our own problems with no external interference. For the principles of Pan-African activism, I think the focus is more about development, governance, rule of law, participation, gender equality, etc. But these are something that make sense for me in my work as an activist in the cyberspace. The only challenge that I see facing the African Union, for example, as an institution that is born from the paradigm of Pan-Africanism, is the essence that, for example, the rule of law should be the essence from which the government gain their legitimacy. However, we witness that many digital rights, for example, or many rights, such as freedom of expression, privacy, still like some taboos in some country in Africa. And there is also some issues. We have like issues and taboos to deal with, such about equality, gender equality, equity. We still have some inhibitions to encourage active participation. Like we don't trust young people. We don't trust social like social organizations or NGOs to be part of the decision making. We still need also to work the governance. We don't have governance. Like for me, I did some research about the African Union. It is hard like to find like clear mechanism about the oversight of this organization that represents us, and or some kind of peer review mode of governance. However, I'm also pleased like to see through my work that there is some brilliant minds, brilliant activists who work day and night to make these principles a normal practice. It's not an easy task to do, but it requires like a lot of work to draft policies and to induce reform within the countries and within Africa. I think the principles of Pan-African activism are universal and can be adopted by any type of activism, But an activist, an African activist, has the responsibility to prioritize the goals they are fighting for, and to protect local agendas from interferences. And this is something that we struggle for. Africa always has some solutions that are brought on ready and that come from exterior. I think the most effective solutions should come from us, from people who are living and dealing with the problems and the issues day and night. For my role model as a Pan-Africanist activist, I think the King of Morocco has proved like to be a Pan-African activist for us in a way. During the reign, like he managed to strengthen the ties of Morocco with pair countries from Africa. Like he activated the involvement of our country in the African Union for the first time. Like Morocco has been in the African reunion or at the conference. I don't recall the term, like the political term, but I think Morocco has been present during these kind of reunions. We updated our historical curriculum to capture the history of the first inhabitants of Morocco in North Africa. And I think also that the king guided our foreign policy and diplomacy to embrace all Pan-African principles. In the work that we are doing in the cyberspace, it might get tricky, like as borders and law enforcements become thin, like in the cyberspace. But the first challenge, like for example, I noticed is that the internet governance in Africa has room for improvement. Young people are repressed, like even digitally, even the work of Cydia. In some countries like Nigeria, we witnessed like shutdown of Twitter. And this is a form of repression and censorship. We saw also that in some countries, internet is controlled. Like you're not free to browse everything. You're not free to browse everything that exists online and to learn more about the external world. And I think that the cyberspace can be very scary for activists that defend human rights in general, but in particular for people from Africa, for women from Africa, from people of color. There is always this prejudices that comes with you when you are an African, a person of color, a woman, or a young child. Currently, I believe that history is offering us a unique gift. There is an effervescent momentum that is building up from the work of young people. I think we are no longer like living in hypnosis. We are more aware of our problems and we are working to solve them like actively. We are no longer a passive receptive end of the problems. We are actively looking for our solution. And I think all the work and this momentum can yield a result if we manage to create more communication channels between all these people to bridge their work together and to offer them more opportunities of partnership and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was so rich. And when you were talking about our education and the gap, and I was thinking just how so true it is. Our very last forum, we were talking about education. And one of the things that I think we went to at length was this lack of engagement with history. And one thing that you really emphasize is not just within, we think about, many of us don't even think through the history of our own country and how our own country has been part of this bigger agenda. So I'm sure many people, all over Africa, not just in Morocco, don't know about, say, the Casablanca Conference and the very critical role that Morocco played. But then also, we don't know each other's histories. And then when it comes to, as you said, the problems, sometimes we have shared problems. I think Cydia had pointed to this earlier, but because we don't learn about it from each other, there is this thing of you feel we're only doing this by ourselves. This is our fight in our own country. We're the only ones going through all this. And yet, if we worked together, there's so much that, as you illustrated, there's so much that we could learn from each other and be stronger together. Thank you very much. Meluda, I've got a couple of questions for you, but I want to listen to what Cydia has to say, and then I'll give you the two questions, the questions together. That was a really, really great way of starting us to think about the issues. Cydia, let me welcome you on.
Thanks. It was really great to listen to Meluda, and when she was talking, I was having some different thoughts around here. So the first question that we wanted to talk about is what for us Pan-Africanism activism is. But I do believe that Pan-Africanism activism, it's about bringing, I would say, creating a space and also a possibility for us as Africans to do other many things that we want to do, because at that point we understand what and where we want to go. Of course, with so many challenges that we have, since I was talking in the beginning, one of the biggest issues is that we cannot think that we will be able to develop without looking what's happening around us. And for us, it's more important that some of us are able to say, hey, whatever you do in your country is important also to look to other people, to look to other Africans and make sure that they have basic conditions and have dignity. So the Pan-African activism, it's about this, making sure that Africans have their main conditions, which is dignity, peace, and are able, of course, to be supporting one each other the way it is possible. It's not possible for us to start talking about Pan-African activism without looking back to the history and see how important this is. We see from what's happened with us, all the struggles and where we are as a continent. Where we are in terms of results, it's not far from where we wanted in the past, but also is not exactly where we wanted to be. The journey is still long, and it's important that we keep pushing and recalling what was the main goal and ambition since the beginning. It wasn't for just Mozambique to be good. It wasn't only for South Africa to be good, it was for everyone as Africans to be able to have basic conditions, and from that start to build the future that we wanted. But still, there are problems here on the ground that we need to face. If we look to what's happening today to the continent, we will see that the same threats that some of the countries are facing are almost the same that the rest of the countries are facing. If we see some threats that an African people is facing in Asia, it's not totally different from the one that is suffering, for example, in America, and so and so. It makes us call the attention that it's important for us to build this possibility of everyone be able to have at least dignity. So this is just the beginning, making sure that whatever are our struggles, there is one place that we all need to be connected, which is to think about the stability of the continent and also us as people. And we can't also forget that if we look back to the history, there are things that were not solved. We as Africans, we are still traumatized. Doesn't matter how many years this passed. I mean, the colonizations and all these things, the formal colonization passed a few years ago. We still have traumas that we need to talk about them. We can't just pretend that nothing happened about us and now, no, we are thinking about the future. No, we need to heal. And this is a conversation that most of the times we don't have. It's really important that we bring this on. And we talk about Pan-African activism. It includes that. It includes also making sure that people know the story, the history, and the history, a true history, not the one that we have been taught about everything that shows that, oh no, Africans was this and that. Now we have access to technology, we have access to information. Now we can reach and know what was the truth. And for that, with that, we need to be able to share with people. There are so many things that we need to share with people because all of these years past were lies. And for us to have clear and very nice sources were difficult, but today is not so difficult as it was in the past. It's very easy for us to learn what's the story of Kenya, to learn the story of Egypt, etc. So why don't we learn? Because from the history, we can understand where and how we can improve the work that was started not by us, but our ancestors when they were fighting for a better conditions for all of us as Africans. So we have here why it's important to do this work. I think I have been always saying this since the beginning. I don't believe in a development that is not inclusive, that is not integrated us as Africans in the continent, but also African descendants and Africans in other continents. Because by the end of the day, doesn't matter what you say to anybody. If someone looks at you by your color, I would say people will definitely make up your story, even though you didn't feel anything or you didn't have the same history, etc. But people will approach you as an African with all the stereotypes, with all the discriminations that most of the people have. So it means that definitely we need to solve this and bring back this dignity to everyone and make sure that an African, doesn't matter where they are, they feel safe, they feel protected. So this is definitely our role, to be sharing all these things specifically to the new generation, but also make sure that we take something, that we take advantage from the generation that is still that exists now. I'm really sorry. I struggle with English sometimes because I'm from a Portuguese country and I'm doing my best here.
Okay. You're making perfect sense. No worries. You're doing very, very well.
Okay, so I wanted to mention these intergenerational conversations that also need to happen, because there is a gap in our story that is not totally clear for some of the new generation. We need to take advantage of the people that are still here to keep telling us what are the things and guide us, because it's like we achieved a certain level of whatever happens, it's just happening, but things shouldn't be like that. We have in our continent leaders who are making decisions, bad decisions, because they know they won't be here to justify what they are doing, and will be this generation who will need to justify something. So it's really important that we don't disconnect the generation so that the vision will continue and we won't have these interruptions, because by the end we will always fall in the same problem that we are feeling. And if we talk about the problems, it's clearly that poverty in the majority parts of the continent is still there. We still have people struggling to eat. We still have people without access to education, access to basic things that we shouldn't be discussing today. On the other hand, we have all these resources that we talk about. So what's happening between here? These are conversations that we don't normally talk. So if we have this country that has this type of resources, we have other that has this type of resource, why this country is suffering and why this country is suffering? Why don't we come together and start making sure that we are able to support one each other and solve basic needs for our people? Who needs to bring these conversations up? It's us. It's everyone who really care about an integrated development. When we ask about the common principles, definitely if we talk about Pan-Africanism, we cannot mention unity and solidarity. Definitely, we can't just forget about this thing, because these are the things that will build us. And today, when we look and we talk about Pan-Africanism, it's not only about bringing together Africans in Africa and also the diaspora. Is more than that. It's also bringing this connection between us that we are here. If, for example, I mentioned things like xenophobia is still happening in South Africa, and we ask ourselves, why is such a thing happening? Like, we forget about our histories. We forget about our vision as the continent, because many people don't have a vision for the continent. So it's very easy for you to see another African and say, oh, this person does not belong to our community. So rather than just saying go out, we prefer even to kill that person the same way that we did. And we still have this hate from one country to others. These are basic things that we should be able to solve. On the other hand, we have countries, for example, with good examples in terms of relations with other countries. We need to be able to to be sharing all this information, but mostly acknowledging that it's important to create good conditions for all of the Africans in all of the continent and also the diaspora, because what's going to happen is that we will create these conditions here, but the consequence of these people not having this will affect the others. So all of the times, this need to be balanced. We need to think ahead. We need to think who is here and how we can all move together. The other question that we have here about the example, the role model. I have a contemporary one, and for me is Farida Naburema, which is a person that I met in the Africans Rising movement area, and taught me a lot about why it's important for us to come all together. And I have been following her work since, I would say, 2016, 17. And until today, I see her, of course, struggling for her country, which is Togo, but all the time she has her eyes open in what's happening in every single country of this world, but all continent, but not only of the continent, but also outside. So for me, having a young person as she is, and also a woman, for me, that's amazing. Most of the times when we hear about all these great people, one time and other we listen to men, but because the role of women have been always underestimated, I would say. I don't know if it's the exactly word. So for me, I would definitely bring her as an example that other women contributed in the past, and they are still doing that for the continent. So the other question, if I'm not mistaken, is about the challenges that we have to promote any action related to Pan-Africanism, etc. I would mention that the first challenge, at least from my perspective, is that we got lost in our history, and most of the times we are all, I would say, concerned about solving our daily needs, such as eat, such as sleep, eat and have a place to sleep, and we have this lack of vision, what's going to happen in future. And we cannot blame people because they are thinking what to eat. Of course, the poverty has been there even since the past, but the conditions were totally different. We have here people, if you ask someone, or you tell someone, oh, let's have a meeting this weekend, let's talk about our history, etc., all of these things, you have young people really concerned about having something to eat, finding a job. Tell him about entrepreneurship he wants. Tell him about, like, let's learn our history. Let's think about the development of the country, of the continent. They see this very far from them. And this is something that shouldn't happen. Definitely shouldn't happen. So we have a gap here that first we need to fulfill. Why is this important? And then start having people coming together, etc. And in my daily examples, one of the things that I've been trying to promote the most, and I think I've been successful, is whatever thing I'm doing, I always try to make sure that we share all the experience with other young people, specifically from the countries that speak Portuguese. Because in most of the times we have been excluded because we don't speak English, and I'm just the exception, and one and other are the exception. Most of the times we lose opportunities. That's why for us to be connected to other Africans is very complicated. We only get connected to people who are close because of the borders, but not like in this high level of conversations or of sitting together and defining plans that we need to do, things that we need to improve, not only in the region, but in the continent in general. But also because of one thing that Meluda said in the beginning is the lack of trust that the society has for young people. Even though we are struggling together, still we have this hand that still don't believe that young people can take the lead. That's why happens all these things that is happening. So also this contributes negatively for the way young people see themselves as promoters of good things to the continent and also to the Africans in in diaspora and also in the continent. So I would mention these two big challenges that first we need to solve, and then we will be able to be talking about other things. And lastly, I wanted to share that one of the biggest challenges is about the concept of being an African. If we ask, yes, if we want to like just make sure that people don't want to talk anymore to you, just ask them, what is being an African for you? And you will see people struggling, trying to justify themselves. Oh no, being an African is this, being an African is that. For the rest of the people in the world, they have very much clear what they are, from where they are coming, where they are going. But us as Africans, we're still struggling to just make that definition. If you find people, and I found also people, for example, from the northern part of the continent, some of them, if they come down here to the south, they will tell you things like, oh no, this is my first time being in Africa. And you ask, what? If your country is also in Africa, but why all of this in terms of course, we have all this cultural and geographically, the differences, etc. But how do we see ourselves as Africans? Where does it start and where does it stop? When do you say, oh no, from here I am, from here I'm not? So all of these things for me are very important for us to bring when we are talking about Pan-Africanism activism. Thank you. We can't hear you.
That has been so amazing. And what I want to do is, first of all, before I have got so many questions, but before I do that, just to be fair, Meluda, do you have anything you want to say to Cydia in response to something that she said? Because she had a chance to speak back to some of what she said.
Yeah, I think that your presentation was very amazing, and it covered a lot of issues that we share. And one point that really triggered my curiosity is about the language barrier. Do you think that the language barrier between us, people who are from different parts of Africa, is something that is hindering our communication, the intercommunication between countries? Or this is something like much higher, something like, I don't know, like conflicts of interest between countries, something else, like ideological, more than just the language barrier?
Thank you. I will just give one example. Couple days, a friend of mine who is organizing a couple movement and organizations in the continent, he asked me to help him connect to very prominent activists, and I was so interested in sharing with him the contacts from people from Angola, etc. But we ended up not adding these people to the group because they couldn't understand English. So that's the beginning of everything. Definitely, the answer is yes. Many people, because they can't speak English, and most of the events that happen in the continent, most of them, they are like start with English and they stop with English. Even for you to get like translation, etc., it's very complicated. So by the end of the day, the language is a barrier. One of my examples and other activists, we learned English not because we enjoy, but because we understood earlier that it was a great opportunity for us to be connected to others and like bring the opportunities and share with the others here.
Yeah, thank you. That is really something that we realize even within a country, the same country, like sometimes some countries have like very diverse ethnicities, and sometimes there is a conflict just because of language barriers. That's really true. I agree totally.
Yeah, my country is one of that. In one of the provinces, you can find 4 different languages, and people struggling to understand each other. It would be easy, of course, if we could be able to connect in a very easy way. But I mean, we have identified the challenge. We need to act on it.
And I guess that becomes a space where even when we start to talk about Pan-Africanist activism, we need to now start thinking about how do we get beyond this language barrier. I mean, between us, you know, we speak, at least I know shared language, English, because we're having this conversation. I know there's some French, some Arabic, some Portuguese, but then there are also a range of other languages. You know, my country, we speak Kiswahili is a national language as well, which we share with some countries all the way down Eastern and Southern Africa. But then, you know, when it comes to conversations, for example, of Pan-Africanism, we end up in only a few languages, and certainly English is dominant. So I'm thinking about what you said in terms of if you want to get people from all over in conversations with each other across the continent, some of the work, and I know we talked about this when we had the forum on language, some of the work has to build these spaces of communication so that, you know, I went online as soon as, you know, I just tried to catch up with you guys on social media, and Cydia, you're in Portuguese, Meluda, you're in Arabic, so I'm trying to figure out, okay, I want to find out more, but then, you know, Google Translate is a good friend, and Collins Translate and all these translation tools, because that was the only way that I'm able to even start to engage. So that's a really great point on language. I think the other thing that you talked about was sometimes, even when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we stay within certain regions. So those of us on the continent will speak to ourselves on the continent. Those in diaspora, different parts, you know, if you're in the Arab region, you may still be of an African identity, but you will tend to speak within that. If you are in Lusophone Africa, whether you're in, you know, whether you're in on the continent or you're in diaspora in places like Brazil, it's easier to have those conversations happening. So I think just thinking about, let's just think a little bit more about what you said in terms of these constituencies of difference and what work is needed to be done. I'm really glad that you spoke about intergenerational conversations. And indeed, part of the intention today was to have Generali Ulimwengu from Tanzania, who can take us back to, he's been working on Pan-Africanism since the 1960s, all the way to the present, and looking at how we can have these conversations on learning from each other. But since I hope he may still perhaps join us before we end, but I would also be curious to find out, have any of you been involved in any kind of networks between people working on the continent and people working anywhere in the rest of the world in terms of Pan-Africanism? And what has that been like? What have been the challenges or the joys of doing that kind of work?
Yeah, personally, I guess my involvement with the work with the UNESCO, which is an international supranational organization, has given me the chance like to compare and to see and to meet people with different expertises and to see their work regarding their interests. And also my work within the African Rising, I joined recently, so I'm really very, very excited to see how this, how the work with African Rising is gonna open for me doors of knowledge about Africa. I think a thing that I learned a lot is, as you said, as you mentioned, and it is about that we live in our own contexts. I think that there is a lot of things that we ignore about other people, their issues, but as Cydia mentioned and explained, we sometimes have some similar issues and that stem from the similar causes, and like we have similar history. So I think that the results could not be any different. I think also that the isolation from spaces, like what the particularity of each space, is something that comes from cultural constructs. Like, I think that, for example, in my region, we have certain issues that are related to our culture, like to the religion that is like mainstream in the Arab region, which is Islam. Yes, we have other religions, but the main religion is controlling a lot of our aspects of life. And I think this difference of values can come also from our differences of cultural issues. So of our differences that are basically cultural. And this is what I learned. I learned basically that, yes, we have some shared problem, but some problems can be contextual. And this is something that we have to be open-minded about, to learn about things that are, like, for example, okay in other cultures. something that are not okay in other cultures, and to be tolerant and open-minded regarding these points.
So that's part of the work that has to be done. Thank you, Meluda. CJ, do you want to add anything?
You were asking about the networking, the work that we have been doing with other people out of the continent. That was the question, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say that definitely being part of Africans Rising opened for me all the doors possible to see exactly what's going around and see that sadly, Africans are struggling outside the continent and we don't have any idea. At least this is how I was living here. I thought we had enough problems from the ones that we had in our countries, dealing with the government, dealing with so many things. But then I found out that definitely there are other Africans that they are just fighting every single day just because they are Africans. And here, us that we are from our countries and we are here, etc., it's very easy for us to like let it go and care about other things. But other Africans that are seen as foreigners in countries, for example, as Brazil, that the majority number of the population is Black people, but still they are seen as the minority just because they are Black people. These things for me doesn't make real sense. And the past few years, I've been engaging so much with activists, Black activists in Brazil and also in UK. And this definitely helped me even be connected to other activists from other countries that are not specifically from this one. But these are the ones that normally we have much communication and we are able to support one each other, even if we can't do a lot, but at least to listen, how is the struggle going, and be able to connect one person to other, because that definitely helps a lot. We think that being able to support people is by making so many things, of course, but there are other very small things, such as connecting someone to other who can help her better, can improve, and also share opportunities with people, because we are talking about this dignity, about people affirming themselves. We need to think, how can we, in a real example, be able to empower people, etc. And if we see African descendants in general, they have lack of opportunities compared to the rest of the people. So whenever we get the chance to, we need to be able to share with the people. And this is what I've been trying to do. And also connect other Africans here, for example, from Mozambique, but that are living in other different parts of the world. The same way with Angolans living in other parts of different worlds. I also mentioned this country, Portuguese countries, because they are the most that I work with. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually also important because, you know, specifically because they are Lusophone, many of the Africans who do not speak Portuguese are not as connected to what is going on over there. I think you both make really important points. One, Meluda, the point that you made, that often we want to assume everybody's identity because we are African, we're all the same. And so we expect people's experiences to be exactly like mine. And it's so easy to say, they're so different from me. I don't even see how we can have a space of solidarity. And it could be cultural, it could be religious, it could be geographical. But that finding that space of saying, even where people are different, let me learn from that difference. And let me figure out how we can be connected. And I can, instead of me seeing them as they're so different, there's no space of connection. And then what you just said, Sidia, in terms of sometimes even solidarity is just letting people know we have your back. We're following your struggle. We're amplifying it. We're talking about it so that people don't feel as isolated. I have a question that's come up, and it's still on this question of solidarity. And the question is, and you know, working together with people who are different from us. This is from Kerubo Abuya. Thank you, Kerubo, and welcome. And she asks, how will Pan-Africanism of the 21st century address the issues of elitism and classism, which have left out many Africans, especially on the continent, from Pan-African conversations? What does Pan-African activism mean for a woman in a rural African community? How can she participate in this activism if inclusivity is the Pan-African tenet? And she's thanking you guys for just such great insights. And I think Europa is doing two things. So I'd like to ask these two questions to both of you. One is the space that many people see, even this question of Pan-Africanism, as being about the elite. And when you look at it historically, it seems to be elite communities that get involved. So how do you bring it so that it's grassroots? And I think both of you alluded to this, but here we are talking, and all of us have at least the benefit of a graduate education. We're able to come onto Zoom and have these conversations. So how do we make this available to people who don't have this? And then the second one is this question of, what does Pan-Africanism mean if I'm on the ground? Right? What does it mean to me in my space? If it's a rural space or an urban space, what does it mean right here on the ground? So both of you, whichever of you wants to answer any aspect of that question.
So I believe, like, for her question, like, as a person who came from like a very simple background, my family, I was born in a very small town, forget it town in Morocco. Nobody, like, even if I tell some Moroccans, they don't know where this town is located on the map. They don't know where it exists. And I grew up like studying through the public school, and I was brute forcing the system. So this is it. I think I understand and I relate to people, to women who are living in rural and very traditional like communities, where women cannot, for example, fulfill her potential. She cannot like go to school, she cannot study, she cannot have work. She is always disadvantaged, like at the level of, at any level, like even applying for a job, like hiring a woman can be hard. For example, if you are requiring like a much higher remuneration or a wage, like there's always this wage gap between men and women. And in my discipline, which is technical, a little bit technical, and in science in general, like we're gonna find like very few women. But I think I have seen a lot of women, African women, doing a lot of good outside there. Like in Europe, like I can find some very valedictorian women in very high prestigious universities such as Oxford or MIT or whatever. For a person, like a unique person, like we should never think that we are alone in a situation. I am a woman, like there is a lot of women like me in various parts of Africa, and think that I can do for myself. Like if, for example, I did good for myself, I can cut through and help people who were in my situation like before. I can understand and relate to these people. For example, I can, I have like, for example, been involved in some networks where I have to help some women, like some young girls, and like understand how they can, for example, apply for some universities outside there, like from here, from Africa, and they have like very few means, how to get scholarships, how to be out there, how to make a noise and be recognized out there. So I think you should never think of a woman, like a small girl going to school in a very like very far or very remote area in Africa as a unique, as one person. It's a lot of girls out there. And the things that you can do for yourself can really impact the lives of many other girls out there. And not only on your country or on your small town, but in the whole Africa. So I think that just changing the way we see girls in Africa can be beneficial for other girls from our continent. So Pan-Africanism is a very crucial part of our identity as girls who are trying to cut through the system.
Mm-hmm. Sidia?
Yes, thanks for the question. How can we make Pan-Africanism something for people and organizations from the grassroots, etc.? First is that this is not happening now, and it's not happening soon if we don't solve other problems that we need to solve. If you paid attention, as I was saying in the beginning, talking about Pan-Africanism, it's something for definitely people who have this vision of the African people and where we want to go. But this, I would say, it's even a privilege for us to be talking about these things. Other people, it's not because they don't really want, but there are other challenges that they are facing, such as, I would say, poverty in a certain hand, because most of the people, like in general, not totally in general, since they struggle even to know what to eat today, it's very complicated even to think anything else about a future. It comes also, even if we want to analyze the politics in other countries, how people get involved in all these processes, etc., how they decide what is their political party, if they are from the right, from the left. We see this conversation left and right in terms of political preference in everywhere. But when it comes to countries like mine, we almost don't have these discussions. People choose their political parties based on who will provide food for them, and not necessarily if these people, they have this approach, they follow these values, these principles. People don't really care about these details. But I'm not using this as a full excuse, because in other hand, we do have people who are intellectual, I would say, but they don't care about Pan-Africanism. They don't care about these things. They don't literally care about anything. So I would say, if you ask me, so okay, now we have identified the challenge. What is the solution? I would say the education. We need to make sure that our education inspires people for these things. We need to make sure that the history, of course, it's important to learn what happens in the West, in whatever, but it's really important to make sure that at school, people understand where we are coming from and what are the steps that we can use and follow to achieve what our ancestors were trying to bring for us in terms of better conditions for everyone as Africans. So I would say definitely we need to invest in education. Our education needs to focus on not only on learn this and that, and that's okay, find a job for you, find etc. etc. No, it's about developing, but an integrated development, but literally knowing the history. Because today, what I can say is that if you don't have anybody claiming or wanting to talk about this, it's probably a person that doesn't know what is Pan-Africanism and why this is important to the continent. So yeah, totally, education is the only thing that will bring this conversation to the other levels, and also will allow us to also be able to solve some of the basic challenges that we have, so people will have enough power to talk about these ambitions things, not only for their countries in general, but the continent, because at this level, it's mostly about their families, about finding a job, about feeding their families, and that's all. But we are thinking bigger now.
A follow-up question to that then would be, again, from Kerubo is asking still, if then having Pan-African conversations is for the privileged, can those of us who claim to be Pan-African activists claim that we speak for the people, right? Because, yeah, are we only speaking for the elite?
I don't know if I understood the question. We are talking on behalf of the elite or of the other group that it's not here?
I think, Sylvia,
go ahead,
if you allow me, I think that like the first idea that jumps into the mind of one when we are talking about Pan-Africanism is about these high-level meetings between like diplomats and high country representatives between countries, and that's not the Pan-Africanism. That's just the institutionalization of a fragment of an aspect of Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism, as an activist, you can connect with other people and you can think about issues that you share with other Africans. And this discussion, even if it is not in a in an air-conditioned room with the like high logos and the the map of the African Union, it still can have an effect. So I think that elitism, yes, we still have in our continent, like access to politics, access to diplomacy positions can be still like restricted to some elite, some old like people who like benefited from the evacuation of colonization from our countries, and they see the opportunity. Some families, like they are always there on position of authority, but still on our work, like individual work, our own ground work, our grassroots work, we still can have conversations that are diagonal on the continent, and still be considered a Pan-African activist and a Pan-Africanist discussion.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then you're saying that it has to happen at all the levels. There will be conversations that will happen in elite spaces. And here, especially if you think about, African Union, those, the states and some of the bigger organizations. But part of the challenge for this moment is to make sure that Pan-Africanism is a conversation in every space that we're in. No space is too little or too big to have it. So I know we're coming to the end of our time together, but I'm just thinking, if I am sitting and listening to this conversation and I'm thinking, you know what, this sounds really great, but I have no idea where to plug in. I'd love to do stuff, as you said, you're already involved in there's so many different kinds of activities and spaces, but I have no idea where to start. How would you give me, what are some of the things I can do to find these networks, to find these spaces, and to plug in?
Okay, so I think I would start, and has it worked for me? When I joined Africans Rising movement, I had access to other movements around. So I would say definitely for those who are listening to us, try to join organizations as Africans Rising that have this vision. There are many activities and ideas. People can reach out at any time and ask what is going on in this country, for example. And what's going to happen is that Africans Rising will connect you with people who are doing what you want to do. That's easy. Not only about specifically Pan-Africanism, but about other sectors, but in activism in general, all this social change and political, you will be connected. And you may say, oh, I don't want to really be part of Africans Rising. I want to be part of this organization. Can you help me connect to this one? Definitely, yes. But it's important also to be connected so that we can learn what other people are doing in other countries so that we can replicate, and there is nothing wrong with that.
Meluda, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that Sidia has said the gist of it. I think that we have always to be not afraid to talk to people who are not from our countries. We can meet people just by seizing opportunities, forums, applying for anything that works, for forums for example, that work in your thematic area, and try to network. I think that any organization must have some networking work and event work, and these events, people who are like-minded and who work on the same thing can join. Even in such webinar, I guess the audience here are people who are very interested in Pan-Africanism, and I think we can people from this audience can network with us and network with each other, so they can find common points between them.
Thank you very, very much. And I know that we are running out of time. I know, Sidia, you have to go, but I wondered if you had some last thought you want us. If we forget everything else, do not forget this one.
Okay, thank you so much. I think it's important that we do our best to make our contributions for our countries, but always add a few more percentages to make sure that we connect with other people. Because most of the times we think, oh, nobody needs us, but that's not true. There is always a way we can help each other. One of the great examples that I like in terms of many things like arts, music, etc., Mozambique and Angola, sometimes they compete. But for example, when it comes to activism, We are so close to one each other. And this didn't happen from night to morning. We until today, we do love one each other, like love. And I'm not saying like a fake love or etc. We do see them as our brothers and sisters, and they see us the same way. Whenever they have any action, all of us here, we are like concerned to see what's going to happen and how we can support the same way. We have anything in Mozambique, you will see Angolan activists, all of them like pushing, making sure that their brothers and sisters in Mozambique will have the best conditions that they have. So I think if we start having these small examples, that it's not necessary, many things, just like checking in people, helping them, sometimes getting job, helping them connecting to others. As I said, this is a great thing that we are doing. And we start building this community by doing small things. So yes, let's give some percentages to support others in other countries, and also follow the news, know what's going on in everywhere in our continent, so that we are able to answer and also to give our idea of how is the best way to handle this and to handle that.
Well, those are some really great pointers. Thank you very, very much. Please stay as long as you can. I'm not chasing you off, but I just wanted to really thank you. Meluda, I know you've also got some great ideas on how we can connect and get plugged in.
I think that CDA has been working on the digital space.
Yes,
and
yes.
I think this is an opportunity for everyone on the continent. Like, we can meet there, like we can find the people who are like us there and who share with us the same concerns. So I think I vote for the digital tools. Maybe I'm biased, but I vote for the opportunity that they can offer for us. Like, there is no need, like I can travel if I cannot offer, afford traveling to another country, but I can know a lot about that country. I think also that some network, for example, in university, they have foreign students, and they have these alumni in universities have like this great network. For example, from my university, from the college where I graduated, we have like a network from people who came from all around Africa, and it's a very huge network. I mean, a lot of people. I studied with a lot of brilliant people from other countries in Africa. So I think we can start baby steps and connect with the first person we know from our neighboring countries, from other countries that we know nothing about. And I also agree with Tidia, get informed about what's happening out there. Don't be like close-minded. Don't be like guided by the mainstream media that is trying to put your focus on some regions, some other regions. Like, for example, other conflicts are very amplified, like on behalf of real like things that are happening here. And also, I think that our presence online can give another image about Africa. Like, some organizations, like, they benefit from giving a very like disrespectful and undignified image of Africa. But we can bring our art, our history, our music, our differences through festivals, through African festivals, for example, or through literature. I think we have very good literature that is really not under the spot like internationally. So this is it. I think you should only take one step as an individual, and it's gonna be amplified through the butterfly effect. Yes, thank you.
Those are such great points. Thank you very much, Meluda. I mean, I think you guys have summarized it so well that if you want to be a Pan-Africanist activist, just start somewhere. And some really great ideas. Do your research, go online and find, if you're in social media, just scroll and look for who is doing what. It might be another Pan-Africanist, a group of Pan-Africanists, and there are so many networks. We've talked about African Rising, but there are several that are out there. Find a country to get invested in and just start plugging in and learning about them. Find somebody from another country who's in your country or in your community and learn about what's happening there and choose to commit to that country and that space. Find people who are in your own professional area, or maybe if you're a student, other students who are from different spaces. Get into a network that is bigger than your own country. Maybe it's just going to be within your region to start with, but find a space where other Africans, whether they're on the continent or off the continent, are, and just start to engage in. I love the idea, which we didn't really get back to, and I wanted us to have a conversation of intra-generational conversations. So find people around you who are older than you or younger than you who are interested in these things, and just get into conversation, read books, engage in the arts. There are so many ideas that you've put. My mind is already just, running ahead of thinking, how more could I get involved in spaces and places? At the moment, I don't think I'm involved in one, which is Codestria, which is an academic space with people from North Africa. But I would love to be in more spaces like that, to be part of that conversation. So I just want to thank you so much, Meluda, Sidia, for your time, for all the ideas that you've given us. I can't believe the hour and a half passed as quickly as it did. I want to thank everybody who's joining us on YouTube and those who are in with us in the Zoom webinar. And for those of you who will be watching this, let me encourage you to share, to amplify this conversation and all the other conversations. As I said, they are on our hosts pages, both on YouTube at The Elephant and Alliance Française, where this is live streaming currently, and also on The Elephant's website. Let me thank our hosts. It's always such a privilege that we continue to find that IFRA Nairobi, Alliance Française, the Nairobi, and the Elephant are willing to make the space for these conversations to happen. However, let me say that they are coming to an end. This is our 9th and second last conversation. We will have our final conversation next month. There will be another phase to this project. And if you want to know what we're planning and where we'll take the conversations, please join us on 26th July as we wrap up this particular series of conversations with our 10th conversation, where we'll be really thinking about what do we want to be the legacy for the future from where we stand today. Meluda, Sidia, thank you so much for making that time, and everybody else who has joined us. And we will be talking again on 26th July. Thank you, everybody.